And say so formally welcome everyone to our weekly call. Hope you all had a fantastic weekend. I'm going to just share my screen for a moment, as always, just to remind you what we're going to talk about today. So we sort of trailed this topic over the last couple of weeks. So our theme for the call today, as you can see, is blockchain and the DNS, with a slightly provocative title of with the development of the Ethereum Name Service, is the DNS obsolete? Although we might range a little more broadly than that specifically. And I think it's fair to say, when this topic was mentioned over the last couple of weeks, there was a degree of skepticism from those of us that were on the call. Georgia and Nathan have joined us from the DNS Research Federation to specifically talk about this topic. Perhaps start the conversation with some actual data, which is always a good thing, so we can have informed skepticism on the topic. So we'll sort of kick off as always with that presentation, have a discussion, and then, time permitting, I'll also just touch on some sort of recent developments, forthcoming events, etc. So without further ado, let me stop sharing. Welcome both Georgia and Nathan onto the call. So thank you both for joining. And well, over to you. Basically, if you've got slides, you can should be able to share your screen on your devices if you wish.
Hopefully you can see that. So let's see.
Worked immediately, which is always a good start.
You can see that, can you?
We can see it as
Excellent.
the presenter view. So you probably want to select the little book-like icon. Yes, that works well usually.
There we go.
Good.
Well, thanks, Andrew. So as Andrew said, I'm Georgia Osborn. I'm from the DNS Research Federation, here with Nathan Alan. I'm a senior research analyst here at the DNS Research Federation, and I also look after a lot of the researchers that we have. And Nathan, do you want to do a quick?
Yeah, I'll do a quick intro.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name's Nathan. I'm the Director of Engineering at the DNS Research Federation. And yeah, I've been responsible for a lot of the data gathering that we're going to be sharing with you today on the blockchain naming system.
So Nathan and I did a paper. The title is Web3 Disruption in the Domain Name System, Understanding the Trends of Blockchain Domain Names and Their Policy Implications, which was really kind of looking at the data, understanding the trends, and putting in some information and data into this quite polarizing topic that we have. So first of all, what is the DNS Research Federation? We're a UK not-for-profit with a mission to advance the understanding of the domain name system's impact on cybersecurity, policy, and technical standards. And we achieve this through education and research, improving access to data, and engagement in technical standards. So this paper was part of sort of filling in the governance gaps that is the world of decentralized governance. So first of all, you know, it's a polarizing topic. It's met with a lot of skepticism. And the big question is it nothing more than another alternative route that just won't be very successful? Or do they offer a novel way of managing online naming and addressing in a decentralized way? So, you know, you get a lot of the blockchain skeptics who are obviously more of the, you know, it's just another alternative route, it's not worth looking at. Whereas you do have some surprising people who are really quite fascinated by this and who are motivated to make this project work. So there has been little literature about it. You know, there was one paper from ICANN that dealt with the challenges with alternative naming systems, which can put the link up to there. And then we also have our paper is going to be going into the Journal of Cyber Policy Shortly, actually, it's going to be published in the journal. And also it's available pre-publication on SSRN. So it sort of deals with the questions below, which are: what are the trends in blockchain domain names? Why are people registering them? What can you do on blockchain-based domain names that you cannot do more efficiently on the DNS? And what are the implications of these Web3 names? So first of all, what is a blockchain domain name? Let's see if I can move the screen. There we go, I can see it. So it's a decentralized implementation of a DNS root zone using blockchain technology. So different people call them different things: blockchain domain names, blockchain namespaces, non-fungible token or NFT, or any other chosen name that could be, you know, ridiculous names, whatever you want to call them. So the difference really is that it's decentralized, so there's no explicit laws or policies other than those included in the smart contract. So it's somewhat decentralized, and it can only be accessed using special browsers like Brave, Opera, Firefox, or Beacon browser, or ensuring that settings are enabled on Google Chrome with extensions. And the information of the registrant owner can be hidden on the blockchain. So it's very difficult to tell who has been registering them or who owns a blockchain domain name. You also need a crypto wallet to get one. So you can see it's already looking quite complicated there. So it's got three main use cases that we've identified. The first one would be attaching a blockchain domain name to a cryptocurrency wallet. So you know, if we're talking about Ethereum Name Service, that means you would have, I don't know, Georgia.ens, and you could send me, you know, your cryptocurrency. You could send me Bitcoin, you could send me Ethereum, and the same with Unstoppable. You could have Georgia.crypto. That isn't my crypto address, by the way, so don't try sending me crypto. Then the second use case that we've identified is to create a non-censorable website using a blockchain domain name. So this means you can create content on the interplanetary file system, and then connect it up to your blockchain domain name. So it'd be like content with that blockchain domain name. And then you can also use it for the classic, I guess, domain name trading and selling, that could potentially be used for cyber squatting or anything else that you might think of, trading or otherwise. So these look quite interesting. So what's preventing mainstream adoption? First of all, you have to have a degree of knowledge to be able to have a crypto wallet, and you need a crypto wallet to be able to have a blockchain domain name. So, you know, that's already getting in the quite complicated box. You also need to use a special browser. So either Opera or Brave, they work with a blockchain domain name. There are other ones as well that are specifically attached to blockchain domain names. Or you can use an extension or add-on with Google Chrome and others, I believe. Then the other thing is that you have name collisions, which is really quite a big issue that ICANN is currently looking at around. There was recently a case where somebody had a .wallet TLD on the Unstoppable domain name, and then somebody else registered a .wallet as well. So there's a collision with that, and how do you work that, especially with the new round coming up in 2026 with ICANN. So there's also no clear way of dealing with brand infringement with this. It's a bit like the Wild West, I suppose, with different people trying to get different TLDs. So for example, you can have a blockchain domain name like, I don't know, apple.crypto or apple.ens, although some of them are protected, which I'll go into more detail, but it's very difficult to deal with brand infringement in the Web3 sort of area. And then the last thing I would say is that these are, they're under development. They are clunky, they're impractical, and they're quite complicated. So it's quite easy to see why they're not quite yet sort of adopted by the mainstream.
Georgie, just before you move on, there's a quick
Yes.
question in the chat where, which I think would be useful to clarify, which is the need for a crypto wallet. Is this the case only for the domain name owner or also for clients resolving a domain name?
Want me to answer that?
Yeah, you can answer that, Nathan.
So yeah, there's no need to have a crypto wallet to resolve a domain name. The resolving of blockchain domain names is solely down to the browser itself and its support for that. So hopefully that answers that.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. So this paper, I've just seen also another question in the chat from David Charles Lawrence, which I will answer at the end of the presentation, but I'm really happy to answer any questions that sort of come up. So, because I think that's quite a big question. So we'll go into the, why not both? Why couldn't they be novel and unsuccessful at the end? But definitely one to ask. Thank you, David. So for this article, we had a mixed methodology. We collected primary data, so we actually registered our own blockchain domain names using Unstoppable and Ethereum Name Service, which at the time are the most or were the most popular providers of blockchain domain names. I think they still are. So we registered our own and we tested the use cases that we mentioned in the previous slide. Then we also did some data analysis using our platform dapp.live. So we'll show you some of the data that we've collected, and we compared that data. And then also, so we had some interviews with subject matter experts. So we had a mixture of quantitative and qualitative data there. And I'm going to pass it over to Nathan Alan, who will talk a bit about the data.
Thanks, Georgia. So as you can see here, this is a summary of some of the data points that we've been able to collect over the past year or so relating to the registration of these names on the blockchain. The data that we have been able to gather is from two main providers, one being Ethereum and the other Unstoppable. Unstoppable also operates a second naming service called Zalika Name Service. And so what we've done is we've separated out the total number of registrations per naming service, as you can see on the screen there. In total, we've identified about 7.2 million registrations for these domain names. And of those 7.2 million registrations, that there are just over 1.6 million unique wallets that have registered those names. A wallet in this instance you can liken to a registrant in the traditional DNS domain name space. The most popular record types that we've identified from these domain names, and a record is something that you attach to a blockchain domain name in order to make it work. So similar to how a DNS record would work, a resolver record in this case is what you would attach to the domain name in order to make it do something. And so the most popular record types that we've identified in our database is crypto addresses. So the majority of use cases here are where people are using them to identify a particular wallet, whether that's an Ethereum wallet, a Polygon or Matic wallet, and a Bitcoin wallet. You can see about fourth way down the list, the fourth most prominent use case would be for attaching it to a website. So as Georgia mentioned earlier, you can upload content to the interplanetary file system, the IPFS, which is a decentralized file sharing platform where you can upload HTML content and then have your domain name linked to that content. So when you go to your domain name in a compatible browser, such as Brave, Opera, and Chrome with certain plugins, it will resolve that domain name like a normal domain name to HTML content that's hosted on the interplanetary file system. On the left-hand side, with a simple graph showing the rate of registrations over time and how that's increased. Next slide, Georgia. So if we break down the data that we've got into the by different TLDs, you can see that the most popular is the .eth, which is operated by Ethereum. Unstoppable do also sell the .eth TLDs on their platform, but that's only happened quite recently. So the majority of registrations would have been direct through the Ethereum naming service. And the rest of the TLDs that you see here are all can all be registered via Unstoppable. Ethereum naming service only operates one single TLD, the .eth. And Unstoppable has a whole variety of different TLDs that they operate. Crypto.
I didn't get that.
NFT,
Could you try again?
NFT.wallet, and so on. There are a couple of differences between registrations on the Ethereum naming service and the Unstoppable naming service. The first of all being that domains that are registered with Unstoppable do not expire. So unlike traditional domain names where you register them for a certain number of years or a certain period, Unstoppable domains, once they are registered, they never expire. So they are, you purchase them once and that's it. Ethereum domain names work in a similar manner to traditional DNS domain names, where you expire them for a period, where you register them for a period of time. So 1, 2, 3, 4 years, etc. And so that's just showing the difference there between the data sets. If you go on to the next slide, Georgia.
I will also just
Yeah,
add that when we were doing the project back in May, there was a just over 6 million registered blockchain domain names, and you can see from the previous slide that's gone up by about 1 million just in the last few months. So I just wanted to kind of bring that attention to that. It's been really increasing quite rapidly.
So just move that out of the way. So some of the differences between the two naming services that we have access to, and I should say at this point in relation to how we have been able to gather this data, we have APIs that we use to gather this information directly from the Ethereum naming service and also from Unstoppable. So that's just to make that point. The fee structures, as I mentioned, Unstoppable is a one-off payment and then you own it forever. You are able to transfer it at any point. And Ethereum has a registration yearly fee. In terms of during our testing, the registering a domain on Ethereum, at least when we performed our tests back in May, connecting or registering a domain name on Ethereum requires you to have a wallet up front. You then need to connect your cryptocurrency wallet to your browser. And then once your browser is in sync with your wallet, you are then able to register a domain name. Registering a domain name has a set fee. I believe it's about $5 for Ethereum, $5 or $10. But then on top of that fee, you have to pay a gas fee for the privilege of minting that transaction on the Ethereum blockchain. And the gas fees for Ethereum are variable. And it depends how busy the network is. And so that gas fee can rise quite dramatically even throughout the day. So there's that aspect that's involved in registering domains as well. It isn't just a set $10 and the way you go. You have $10 and then whatever the gas fee is at that time in order for that domain name to be minted to the blockchain. And every time, each year when you renew, you then also have to pay the gas fee for the renewal for the minting process to happen. Unstoppable is slightly different. They operate on a different blockchain, predominantly the Polygon Matic blockchain. Gas fees are a lot smaller there, and they don't actually separate the cost. It's just one fee, and effectively the gas fee for that is incorporated into the cost of the domain name. And again, because there's no renewal, you don't have to continually pay any additional gas fees on top of that each year when you renew. So that kind of covers the data and the technical aspect of registering and using blockchain domains. In both cases, it's fairly straightforward within the registering process to attach cryptocurrency wallets and to add websites. During our testing, we found it a bit more straightforward via Unstoppable. They have a few more tools in place that allow you to more easily manage and update your domain name. It was a bit more consumer focused from that point of view. So I'll leave it there, and I'll hand over to Georgia to finish up with the governance aspect of these names.
So thanks, Nathan. The governance aspect varied, depending on which one. So they say that they are decentralized, and they are to a degree, but there's always an element of some kind of agreement of what the governance model will be, whether they can just get load of blockchain domain names and park them. So for instance, someone from Ethereum Name Service said that the reason why they wanted to do a yearly rent fee was to prevent parking. So there's sort of methods and ways that these different providers sort of go about how they organize their governance model. So Ethereum Name Service has that enables members to vote on new policies as well, so that they use governance tokens to vote on them. And they have 5 sort of things that they sign up to when they join, which I think one of them is about brand infringement as well. And they all vote on it. So it's sort of like a vote system. Then they also have the Web3 Domain Alliance, which is it's sort of initiative that Unstoppable really were the beginning of the Web3 Domain Alliance. And currently, if you look on Twitter, you can see a bit of infighting between Ethereum Name Service and Unstoppable around Web3 Domain Alliance. So Unstoppable Name Service also has a list of protected names. I believe they protected about 10,000 of the most popular names to stop brand infringement on those. However, if you weren't chosen as the 10,000 most popular, you were sort of just left behind as an organization or as an entity to prevent brand infringement.
It's also worth pointing out at that point that whilst they have a list of protected names, you can still register those names within other strings. So I think they've only protected the exact match. So for example, apple.crypto, apple.NFT, you could purchase, for example, my Apple products.crypto. So that's just to make that point.
So the key findings of our paper, so we found that blockchain domain name registrations has been increasing rapidly, and the success of adoption is speculative in nature, just like blockchain, just like the success of crypto, I guess. It's a speculative trade. There's likely to be more blockchain domain name providers. I think the last time I counted, there were over 20 blockchain domain name providers. So if you think about the Ethereum Name Service and Unstoppable Name Service having around just over 7 million blockchain domain names, then imagine that with 20 of them sort of popping around, maybe not with quite so much, but there's obviously a big amount of Web3 domain names around. And the technology is advancing and registration is increasing, but the governance models seem to be fractured. So you've got the Web3 Domain Alliance, which hasn't brought everyone in unity. And you've also got the Ethereum Name Service, which so far has not joined the Web3 Domain Alliance. But what I will say here is that the conversation has changed massively since the start of the project. So at the beginning of the project, the general attitude, I would say, from the domain name industry was don't talk about it, because if we talk about it, it would be a thing. And we don't want it to be a thing. And also we should ignore it. And generally the attitude has changed over the course of the last 6 to 7 months, really since we worked on the project from the beginning. More people are, I think we had Brad Can, the CEO of Unstoppable Name Service, and ICANN speaking in Hamburg. So you can see that there is a level of interest in this now, and it's becoming more of a thing. Then there also seems to be a change from the blockchain domain name providers as well, which are more in favor of integration. So there is a belief amongst both the Ethereum Name Service and Unstoppable Name Service that they will not be successful unless they integrate with the DNS. So this is a conversation that's currently ongoing. So this goes back to, I guess, the beginning of the conversation around whether the DNS will be obsolete or whether they are, whether they are basically in opposition of each other. I don't think that the blockchain domain name providers are saying that they're in opposition of the DNS. I think there's a real there's initiatives to work with the DNS. I'm not saying that's the case for every single blockchain domain name provider, as I'm sure more will spring up as time goes on. But it definitely, there seems to be a lot more in favor of integration, and I will say more about that later on. So the recommendations that we had were increased alliances and policy forums. So there needs to be some form of unity, particularly with the blockchain domain name providers. So, my concern actually is that there will be that, generally we all are in favor of some kind of integration. So what kind of integration are we in favor of? But also the blockchain domain name providers themselves they're all on different levels and different wavelengths and have different attitudes to ICANN, to each other, to alliances that bring them together, and to governance models. So this is an issue. So unity between them is really important. ICANN involvement at the level of capacity building and engagement. I don't think there is any longer the ability to ignore this, because it's coming up. You've got governments who are really interested in understanding this. Ethiopia are concerned about .eth, even though there's a lot of things that they are concerned about, and if we don't get on top of it, these things could run away with us. Things like blockchain domain name abuse or Web3 abuse, areas that we don't have full coverage over. So upskilling, capacity building is really, really important, and then further research and monitoring of the trends. And then I guess for final thoughts, is the DNS obsolete? No. The future is unknown with blockchain domain names, though. You can't predict it. It's incredibly speculative and also volatile. Anything can happen. You could theoretically learn from the DNS industry and put in some sort of initiative. You could put in some things that will help the blockchain domain names keep going. You could also say that because you can adapt faster in the blockchain in a decentralized way. So therefore, as the technology advances, things can happen much quicker than they can in the DNS world. Then the other thing I would say is money is a key motivator here. So there's real motivation to make this project work. There's a lot of crypto in this industry. There's a lot of money, and there's a lot more blockchain providers who are invested in making this work. And this hasn't necessarily been the case for any other alt route. That's why I think it's slightly different. And it's just, in my opinion, and based on what the blockchain domain name providers say, and also actually what ICANN are beginning to say, it's likely to coexist with the DNS. Integration is the next stage of this discussion. So we've recently just been into the IETF, and I was there, and we were invited to a side meeting with blockchain domain name providers on exactly what they mean by integration. So there's some work to be done around, can we agree on what integration means between blockchain domain name providers, and then perhaps then ICANN attended, you had different people who attended, and if we can get an agreement on what integration means, and perhaps what ICANN can agree with, then that really opens a new discussion there. So we've got part 2 of this research which is on consumer research around why people are using blockchain domain names, but also alt-root governance mapping to track first of all, the name collisions that are happening, and second of all, the government initiatives that are very fragmented. And then you've also got Alex Deacon's blog on brand infringement, which I encourage you all to look at. Nathan, do you have any final thoughts on this as well?
I don't, but I'm happy to start answering questions.
Yeah.
If we have, it looks like we've got a few in the chat.
Yeah.
We have plenty of questions. I should say I've posted in the chat a link to RFC 9476, which is the IETF's alt special use top level domain, which is partly to provide a path to integration potentially with alternative domain name services, albeit it's unmanaged. So if you collide with somebody else's naming, tough is my interpretation of that being unmanaged. That's not clearly not quite what was said in the discussions, but it's unmanaged by design. That's a deliberate choice. Okay, if we go through the questions in the chat first, and then see if anyone else wants to come in with any additional questions. So can I refer you back, and I'll just read these out for anyone that's listening to the recording but perhaps doesn't have the text in front of them. So we start with Tow's that you sort of trailed earlier, Georgia, which is assuming that eventually a simple matter of programming solves at least 3 of the 5 obstacles, those being wallet, browser, and clunkiness. The brand infringement thing would seem to be a pretty major showstopper. What plans are there to address it in a non-fungible or fungible blockchain? Other than what you've covered already, Georgia. So anything additional to say on that, I guess, is probably the question.
Well, so it's a great point about brand infringement. And so there's a lot going on around UDRPs with, I think it's Namecoin, and there's so Handshake is primarily the one that is sort of involved in the UD. So there's I believe they are now accepting of that. Yeah, I don't know. And that was recent as of this last month, I think.
Yeah, it was announced in Washington ICANN earlier this year that WIPO were going to be, that Namecheap were going to be adopting WIPO UDRP decisions for some of their blockchain domain names. Now, it's worth mentioning that doesn't affect any of the TLDs that you've seen here that we've displayed to you from Ethereum and Unstoppable. The cause for that, or the reason for that, is because these domain names that are registered on the blockchain are the property of the wallet holder. And so if you don't have or know the private and public key for the wallet that is in control of the domain name, it can't be taken away from them. And so there is, and that is the case for all the TLDs that we've shown you from Unstoppable and Ethereum. The WIPO agreement with the UDRPs for some of the Namecheap TLDs are those TLDs that are already operating under an ICANN model, so to speak. So they're not actually in the ownership of a wallet held by an individual. They will be in a wallet held by Namecheap. And that is so that Namecheap can then act on the UDRP decision to transfer away, or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. So just to make that point.
Yeah, and I think there are people actively working on this as well, and these decisions get made very quickly. So that's what I mean. I think it's a great point, though. I mean, the brand infringement really does prevent, adoption. Yeah.
Okay, let's work through these, try and do a bit of pace to get as many as we can in the available time. So Ralph has asked, are registrations an FQDN or a domain where the owner can do subdomains FQDN?
Yeah, so you can subdomain these domains. So if you register a domain, you can create subdomains off the back of that. There is a blockchain named Handshake, which a lot of you will be familiar with, where you can register your own TLD, your own top-level domain, and you can then sell second-level domains on top of those. And that's where a lot of the collision concerns are being found, because people can just register whatever TLD they want, and then act as a registry, and sell second level domains on the TLDs that they have created via Handshake.
So
That's
So
something that
let
we
me
haven't
let me
got
maybe
yet.
well, I mean, so let me I asked the question, so maybe I'll continue. Does that mean I have to register them also with some blockchain, or can I just use, I mean, because anything you taught me about blockchain means I'll need to involve cryptocurrency. So anything, there's no way around, right?
No, correct.
Whereas
yeah.
in the DNS, I mean, you get registration, then you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you have to work with your name service provider on the, whoever that is, Ethereum or Names Unstoppable, to add those records. And in the case of Ethereum, there probably would be gas fees involved. So you would obviously have to involve cryptocurrency in that.
So I can just imagine if I register applecomputer.eth now, then I can do an auction for iphone.applecomputer.eth, and what could possibly go wrong? Right, which links nicely to a question from Philippe then. Is there some way to determine whether a wallet stroke name is in use or purely squatting or defensive? So when I want to register my name, what is the management at all? Or
so there is one mechanism, and that is in the resolver records. The Unstoppable allows you to publicly advertise the name as for sale. So you would then, if that was what you wanted to do, you could then attach an email address to that, and in the resolver records, or that would kind of be like the who is, you would see that is available for sale, and here is my email address to contact me if you want to sell it. Now that could be an indicator of cyber squatting, or whatever you want to call it. But I think the other way of understanding how much use is behind these would be based on the records that are attached to the names themselves. And the predominant use is for cryptocurrency wallet mapping at the minute we see.
Yeah. Okay. Killian's question next. So we're mixing the registry aspect of the DNS with the content storage, and putting both onto the blockchain. Thus, there's no additional requirement for something like Tor to retrieve data from a server after the lookup.
Yeah, so I mentioned about mapping a blockchain name to the interplanetary file system. Whilst the IPFS is a blockchain, its prime concern is with file storage and decentralizing file storage. Whereas the naming services and the providers that you use to register the blockchain domain names, their main concern is on if they will use the blockchain as effectively a digital ledger to record transactions, to record ownership of domain names, and to run the smart contracts that are required to make these domain names active and to help them operate and route. So then the main concern of the name service providers on the blockchain is not storage necessarily. That is taken care of by the IPFS, who predominantly care about the storage and decentralization of files. So hopefully that answers the question.
Mm-hmm.
Great question from Kurt. Is internationalization of domain names supported in this?
Yes, it is. You can have, when we first started it, we thought originally that could be a use case for perhaps encouraging IDNs. It's supported. You can also have emojis. There's people with emojis in their blockchain domain names, so there's potential for that moving forward. So yes, it is supported.
Perfect. An observation from Tail: declaration of the obsolescence of the DNS is considered premature. I think that's a comment rather than a question, but yes, I think that's reasonable. Right, Andreas' question: resolving domain name is a question of very few milliseconds in traditional DNS environment. So how does performance compare with blockchain-based DNS? Is the question, I think.
It's a very good question, and we don't have much data on that. at this moment in time, but that certainly is an area that that would be quite good to test and record. And it's there's also, you know, I don't fully understand how the browsers that currently support blockchain domain names resolve them in terms of what takes priority. I assume that they maybe do a traditional DNS lookup first. If that fails, or they check the TLD and then they do a lookup. Or
I think it's different for I think it's different for Brave. And you can actually check it yourself as well. We're on, I think, oxilresearch.crypto. If you go on Brave and check it, you'll find our blockchain based.
I think there's a very rudimentary HTML page that contains a big H1, and that's
and they're not, you know, they're not traditional in the sense of you can only have one you know, web page. You can't have, it's not complex yet, but this is looking that, you know, I think Brad Cam from Unstoppable and also Ethereum Name Service are convinced it's going to advance very quickly, and that the content might be more complex in the future.
Yeah, I guess it's a complicated thing to measure actually performance currently. There's a lot of variables there, but okay. Question from Michael, which I hope I know the answer to. Are you happy to share copies of your slides afterwards?
Yes.
Fantastic. In that case, send me a PDF and I'll share that on the call. Thank you. A question that from Tao, which I guess I was sort of grappling with as well, is have you identified a sort of a valid use case? So is there a problem this solves that isn't solvable sensibly with the traditional DNS?
So it's a great question, and you know, the answer is who you're asking. If the people you're asking are not that happy with ICANN and don't like the way that the traditional DNS is run, then yes, because it takes them out. It makes it so that you are in control of that. And you know, that's probably something for our next stage of research, when we actually go ahead and ask them, you know, why are you using content on this blockchain domain name when you could just be using a DNS based website? I think some brands, particularly fashion brands, see it as a new thing. Gucci has their own blockchain domain name website, and they, you know, they advertise that it's theirs. You have different fashion companies who are invested, so Nike as well, others. You have, so there are sort of key players. A lot of football, you know, football teams are invested in this. There's a lot of money involved. So it just depends on what who you're asking and what their motivation is. You know, for someone like you or I, probably not. No, it's not going to probably resolve anything. But then one of the examples I did give in the paper is around fundraising using cryptocurrency. Some people say, I'm not necessarily one of those people, that cryptocurrency could be used for fundraising, as it was during the Ukraine war. If Ukraine had one blockchain domain name like kind of link, so ukrainewar.crypto, which is an Unstoppable based link, and you could then send 275 different cryptocurrencies to that crypto wallet, which is different from sending putting each individual wallet address in there. So you can, you know, there are things that people say is attractive to them, particularly with content. So let's say it's ukrainewar.crypto. You could have ukrainewar.crypto, and then you could have like a LinkedIn bio of what this cause was, of what, you know, what was going on. People could send you cryptocurrency. So that just gives you quite a sort of overall view. Again, you know, lots of people don't buy into that, and lots of people think it depends on the browsers and what they do next, whether they accept it more, whether the mainstream browsers accept it. A lot of people think it depends on what brand infringement means for it. So there's a lot of different, you know, areas that this could go in next.
Yeah. Okay, let's rattle through these last few. I've closed the queue because we will run out of time and we won't do these questions justice otherwise. I think Ross also is keen to try and understand what problems these sort of efforts solve, to try and summarize that. So I think you sort of talked on that so far. Roxana's asked, do you have any insights into the agreements of the blockchain-based DNS with the browsers? So is that something you've looked into or may look into in the future?
So it's, you know, I think the conversation about integration is the next conversation, and I think that could have potential for getting some of the browsers interested. If this conversation about integration is probably the next phase of what's going on with this Web3 domain world, and I think that's probably the most likely. So yeah, it's a question of watch this space, and I think if the integration conversation is, you know, if Ethereum Name Service and Unstoppable Name Service both agree on what kind of integration they're going to be doing with the DNS, and there's an agreement of the definition, then I can see that there's a potential for more Web3 domain names happening, but not as an opposition to the DNS, but as in coexistence with the DNS.
Yeah. Okay. I'll skip over the comments about Nathan unmuting, as it's a bit late for that now, but I think you're both in the same room, so that's merely an echo.
Apologies for that.
Issue, which can't be helped. There's no easy solution to that. Okay, last couple. From a control point of view, this is a question for Warren. Are companies able to block these lookups? And if content is being shared by the interplanetary, does this have any impact on an organization's ability to monitor or control? So,
that's a good question, and that's more around the IPFS. So you know, the IPFS is a very different system to what blockchain domain names do. Web3 based abuse is something that people are looking at, and I'll let Nathan add, because I think you wanted to add something as well, just around this. But yeah.
Just to say that, you know, we've had discussions with people at ICANN previously who I mean, you know, based on what I said earlier about the ownership of a domain name can't be easily taken away. You know, if there is content on a particular domain name, really the only way to deal with it is to have some kind of block list at the provider level. And so, you know, various conversations that we've had with different providers, it does seem like there are efforts to put those into place and to, you know, to be able to deal with things via that way.
Yeah, I think Ethereum Name Service has their own block list, and I think Unstoppable through the Web3 Domain Alliance is also creating a block list. But I mean, you know, just as an anecdote around the Web3 Domain Alliance, we don't know how far that's going. When I was at the IETF, the Web3 Domain Alliance website was down. And you know, I was with somebody who asked Brad Cam about it, and he didn't answer. So that kind of gives you some insight into how that's going.
Yeah. Okay. I think yeah, so we've answered that one. Emily's put some additional information on Punicode, which is helpful in internationalization, and Marek has also commented on the reliance of IPFS on the top 3 cloud providers, so all about centralization, which is an interesting side point. Brilliant. Right, conscious of the time, it's a complex issue, but let's sort of draw a line there, because there's a couple of things I want to cover in the last 5 minutes, but that was really interesting discussion. So thank you, Georgia and Nathan, for actually bringing some data to the discussion, so we can at least understand why our biases are in fact justified, rather than just rely on the biases all by themselves. So I think that's really useful to have that, and perhaps more seriously, I do look forward to part 2, where it looks like there's a rich vein of additional sort of research sort of opportunity in this space, which is still very, very emergent, I think it's fair to say. So thank you both for that, really interesting, and I will share the slides afterwards when I got them. So and yeah, maybe we'll set a date in the new year for when you've got the second phase done, as I think there'd be plenty of interest in that as well. Right, let me very briefly in the remaining 4 minutes cover a couple of other things as rapidly as I'm able to swap slides. So just share my slides now. Okay, I won't spend much time on some of the sort of recent developments. Just there's a couple of interesting articles on the sort of 40th anniversary of the DNS earlier this month. Some really insightful comments from one particular contributor to an article. Modesty prevents me from saying who that was, but that's a top bullet point. I'll leave you to read that for yourself. Perhaps the other one to mention is the US government getting into protective DNS and some additional services for commercial critical infrastructure entities in the US. So interesting to see how that develops. And RIPE's DNS Resolver Best Common Practices sort of working group has published a draft output, which is worth a look at there. And you might want to see how that compares with the European Resolver policy that we did a couple of years back, which covers similar ground. There's other stuff which we won't have time for now, but you can read that at your leisure. I'll circulate these slides as well. Two other items of interest: QR code phishing is a thing. Not great, not really surprising, but Whalebone have published a post on that, and also Palantir has won the British NHS service contract. What could possibly go wrong springs to mind. In terms of deadlines for forthcoming papers, I just highlight that the sort of 28th November for OARC 42, so the deadline's been pushed back by a week, so you've got till tomorrow if you wish to put forward any proposals for presentations there. And then there's got a bunch of other deadlines coming up over the next few weeks. One I've added to the list, which I put in bold, is Eurodig. Coming up, just issues rather than presentations at the end of next month. So that's a new addition. The other ones as previously. On forthcoming events, if you're in Rome, you're at RIPE, so you'll know that started today. Reminder, Wednesday is the DNS working group, 8 till 9:30 UTC time. So I'll skip these out of order. So and that's the agenda for the DNS working group. So it's only an hour and a half. Includes a presentation on DELEG. I'm pleased to see, since that was mentioned by Dave a few weeks back, as well as some other stuff. Also. Tomorrow, I think it is. Our friends at Echo, through their Top DNS initiative, working with the DNS Abuse Institute, have got a webinar. Again, I'll circulate these slides shortly, so if you haven't already seen this, you can register for that. It's tomorrow afternoon, European time. And then finally, I haven't confirmed a topic for next week, but seeing in the chat, maybe perhaps I might take Warren up on his kind offer to talk about QR-based phishing, which could be quite interesting. Perhaps we discuss that offline, Warren. I was going to also ask Dave if he'd be prepared to reprise his DELEG sort of presentation from this week, if you're around next week as well, Dave. Week after, I'm hoping, I haven't confirmed it yet, that we're talking about the Internet Standards Tracker. I'm just waiting for Caroline to confirm if she can do that. And then, let's see, Peter's sort of dropped off the call, which is a real shame. So he's yet to see his happy picture, but he's kind offered to do a Christmas karaoke, but he's not on the call to find that out. So I'll have to speak to him separately about that. Okay, and it's just on the hour, so quickly, just to see if anyone has anything else that you want to raise in our last sort of 60 seconds or thereabouts. And if so, please raise your virtual hand for expediency. And as I say, whilst you're thinking, if Warren, if you are happy to talk about QR-based phishing next week, let me know. And similarly, Dave, if you're happy to reprise your DELEG presentation, if you're around also next week, just let me know.
I will. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. You said that without moving your lips. It appeared on here. I think there may be a slight time lag, which is quite spooky. Brilliant. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I'll take it there's no AOB. So thank you again, Georgia and Nathan, for a really interesting, thought-provoking presentation. I think there'll be questions coming afterwards. But sort of the DNS enthusiasts, I think, can rest easy for now. But it looks like the future's getting complicated, if not better. But that's probably a truism on many things. So with that, that thought, thank you, everyone. Hope you have a fantastic week and look forward to catching up same time next week. So see you all then. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.